Hey guys, another First for Friday for you. We are going to start off with The Secret Garden. This is one of my very favorite books. It's got a Lexile level of 900, so it'll be a really good one for those of you who are on a higher reading level or who like a little bit extra of a challenge. It's enchanting, magical, and secret. Some of you may have even seen this movie. Mary Lennox needs some magic in her life. Her parents have died in a faraway land, and Mary has been taken to a mysterious mansion to live with her distant uncle. She has no friends and no joy, until she finds a key to a wonderful secret garden. Now Mary will discover that miracles can happen and that magic is real. Chapter 1. There's no one left. When Mary Lennox was sent to Misselthwaite Manor to live with her uncle, everybody said she was the most disagreeable-looking child ever seen. It was true, too. She had a thin little face and a little thin body, thin light hair, and a sour expression. Her hair was yellow, and her face was yellow because she had been born in India and had always been ill in one way or another. Her father had held a position under the English government and had always been busy and ill himself. And her mother had been a great beauty who cared only to go up to parties and amuse herself with happy people. She had not wanted a little girl at all, and when Mary was born, she handed her over and took care of Aya, who was made to understand that if she wished to please the Mem Sahib, she must keep the child out of sight as much as possible. So, when she was a sickly, fretful, ugly little baby, she was kept out of the way. And when she became a sickly, fretful, toddling thing, she was kept out of the way also. She never remembered seeing familiarity anything but the dark faces of her ayah and the other native servants. And as they always obeyed her and gave her her own way in everything, because the Mem Sahib would be angry if she was disturbed by her crying, by the time she was 6 years old, she was as tyrannical and selfish as a little pig as ever lived. The young English governess, who came to teach her to read and write, disliked her so much that she gave up her place in 3 months. And when other governesses came to try to fill it, they always went away in a shorter time than the first one. So, if Mary had not chosen to really want to know how to read books, she would never have learned her letters at all. One frightfully hot morning when she was about 9 years old, she awakened feeling very cross, and she became crosser still when she saw that the servant who stood by her bedside was not her ayah. "Why did you come?" she said to the strange woman. "I will not let you stay. Send my ayah to me." The woman looked frightened, but she only stammered that ayah could not come, and when Mary threw herself into a passion and beat and kicked her, she only looked more frightened and repeated that it was not possible for the ayah to come to Missy Sahib. There was something mysterious in the air that morning. Nothing was done in its regular order, and several of the native servants seemed missing, while those whom Mary saw slunk or hurried about with shy and scared faces. But no one would tell her anything, and her ayah did not come. She was actually left alone as the morning went on, and at last she wandered out into the garden and began to play by herself under a tree near the veranda. Okay, so that is The Secret Garden. The next one is Resistance. Shaya Linder is a Jewish teenager living in Nazi-occupied Poland. Simply being Jewish places her in ever-present danger of being killed or sent to the camps. After her little sister is taken away to a death camp, her younger brother disappears, and her parents all but give up hope. Chaya is determined to make a difference. Using forged papers and her fair features, Chaya becomes a courier, able to travel between the isolated Jewish ghettos of Poland and smuggle food, documents, and even people. Soon, Chaya finds herself drawn into more perilous work. She joins a resistance cell that runs raids on the Nazi supplies. But after a mission goes terribly wrong, Chaya's network shatters. Many of her colleagues are arrested or killed. Chaya is alone and unsure of where to go until Esther, a member of her cell, delivers a message that chills Chaya to her core and sends her on a journey toward an even larger uprising in the works, the Warsaw Ghetto. Though the Jewish resistance never had much of a chance against the Nazis, they were determined to save as many lives as possible and to show the world that the Jewish people could stand strong in the face of unimaginable horrors and adversity, to fight for their survival, to live or die with honor. So it's a really long description, but it's a very intriguing book. I really, really like stories about World War II or things that happened about that time. I think they're fascinating. Chapter 1, October 5th, 1942, Tarnow Ghetto, southern Poland. 2 minutes. That's how long I had to get past this Nazi. He needed time to check my papers, inquire about my business inside the ghetto. Maybe he wanted a few seconds to flirt with a pretty Polish girl, or for her to flirt back. But no more than 2 minutes. Any longer and he might realize my papers are forged. It's the Jewish blood in my veins, no matter how Aryan I look. Guten Morgen. This one greeted me with a smile and a hand on my arm. I learned early not to smuggle anything inside the sleeves of my coat. You only had to be stupid once, and the game was over. This officer was younger than most, which I once believed would give me an advantage. I'd thought the younger ones would be more naive, and maybe they were. But they were also ambitious and eager to prove themselves, and fully aware that capturing someone like me could earn them an early promotion. Guten Morgen, I replied in German, but with a perfect Polish accent. I smiled again, like we were old friends, like I wasn't as willing to kill him as he was my people. Why geht? I didn't care how he was doing, on the morning or in any other day, but I asked it because it kept his attention on my face rather than my bag. Like other ghettos throughout Poland, Tarnow Ghetto had been sealed since nearly the beginning of the war, cut off from the outside world, cut off from Jews in other ghettos. This isolation gave total power to the German invaders, power to control, to lie, and to kill. For the past 3 months, I'd worked as a courier for a resistance movement known as Akiva. My job was to break through that isolation, to warn the people, and to help them survive if I could. But we were increasingly aware that time was running out. We'd seen people being lured into the trains with promises of bread and jam, pacified to think that they were being relocated to labor camps. Then they were crammed into cattle cars without water or space to move, and their destination was never to a labor camp. They were headed for death camps, designed to kill hundreds or even thousands of people a day. I'd seen them, been sickened by them, had my heart shattered by them. The Nazis called these camps their solution to the so-called Jewish problem. So, that is resistance. This next one is called The Midnight Hour. Oh, sorry, the resistance. This one's Lexile 820. The Midnight Hour. Another world lives within the stroke of midnight. When strange late-night letters start arriving at home, Emily's parents set off to investigate. But when her parents disappear completely, Emily is left alone to face the weird strangers who begin to appear at her door. Taking all the clues at her disposal, she'll set off to discover the secret world of the Midnight Hour, a Victorian London frozen in time, full of magic and monsters. Kept safe by an age-old agreement, the night folk of the Midnight Hour have been exiled to a parallel world that can only be accessed by a select few. But when the division of the two worlds is threatened, Emily must battle the clock and search for her parents while navigating this dark and unknown version of London. Armed only with a packed lunch, her very sleepy hedgehog, and her infamously argumentative mouth, Emily must escape bloodthirsty creatures of the night, figure out her own family secrets, and just maybe save the world. So for those of you who like fantasy, this will be a really good book for you. It's a very, very new book. It was just published or just released at the beginning of March. So there's not a Lexile level for it yet. But it is suggested for ages 10 and up. Chapter 1, The quarter bell woke Emily in the night as Big Ben's chime sang across the river to Lambeth and in through her bedroom window. The street lamps outside bleached the room in a faint orange. On the wall above her bed, 3 black glass hares chased one another in an endless circle, glinting in the light. Both her pillows and Fiche, her cuddly crocodile, were damp with tears. She levered herself up, then groaned at the red numbers on her alarm clock. 1:45, 7 hours since being sent to bed forever, and she was starving. She flopped back down on the pillow and nuzzled poor soggy Fiche, who she only kept as a joke and definitely didn't snuggle every night. How had this happened again? How? And as always, her mom was the problem. There was just something so infuriating about her that it kept turning Emily into a human firework of foot-stomping rage. Light fuse, stand well back. Whiz, bang, pop. Huge fight, grounded. It was totally unfair. She'd been well within her rights this time, too. Billy Jenkins from school had seen her helping her mom get something out of a dumpster and had told everybody she lived like trash. It had made her cringe so hard there was a medical possibility that she'd never uncurl, and it was all her mom's fault. According to their neighbor's most recent complaint to the council, her mom was a crazy Irish art woman who made noise at all hours. Emily didn't disagree, but would have added deeply shameful if her mom didn't keep dragging her out on special missions to get important art material from dumpsters to make crazy sculptures. Then none of this would have happened. She wouldn't have been totally shamed at school, and she wouldn't have gotten so angry that she'd run home and ended up screaming at her mom in the kitchen about everything embarrassing she'd ever done. Highlights, which included peeing behind a bush at the track on field day, rescuing a lobster from a fish tank at a fancy restaurant, and once getting on the bus dressed as a horse. Emily wouldn't have made her mom cry either. The last bit had been pretty horrible. In fact, she had maybe said some things she really sort of regretted. Now she was grounded so hard by her dad, she probably would have to be homeschooled. Familiar with that concept, huh? She wouldn't admit if she were forced to buy, like, a truth potion or something, that her big mouth hadn't helped matters. Her mom called it the family gob, as if it was an inherited disease. If so, Emily totally had a bad case of it. When she was annoyed or embarrassed, the gob had a mind of its own, and her mom was annoyingly embarrassing all the time. And that was why she hadn't said sorry. And that was why she wasn't allowed out of her room until Christmas. So that is The Midnight Hour. It's not one that I've read yet, but I'm really excited to. It sounds very entertaining. And the last one is also a brand new book. This one just came out in April sometime, and it may not be completely available everywhere yet. But it's called Echo Mountain. And this one sounds really good too. It happens during the Great Depression. So when the Great Depression takes almost everything they own, Ellie's family is forced to leave their home in town and start over in the untamed forests of nearby Echo Mountain. Ellie has found a welcome freedom and sorry, my throat is getting very dry. And a love of the natural world in her new life on the mountain. But there is little joy, even for Ellie, as her family struggles within the aftermath of an accident that has left her father in a coma. An accident unfairly blamed on Ellie. Determined to help her father, Ellie will make her way to the top of the mountain in search of the healing secrets of a woman known only as the Hag. But the Hag and the mountain still have many untold stories left to reveal, and with them a fresh chance at happiness. And then there's a little note here from the publisher. It says, Echo Mountain is a celebration of finding your own path and becoming your truest self. So if you're interested in finding yourself, finding a path, then this is a book for you. Chapter 1. The first person I saved was a dog. My mother thought he was dead, but he was too young to die. Just born, still wet and glossy. Beautiful, really, but not breathing. Take him away, she said, sliding him into my cupped hands. Her voice was cold, Perhaps that's why it shook a little. But I knew her better than that. Maisie curved round her 3 living pups as they poked Blindy toward her milk, watching me with aching eyes. I could feel how much she hurt, too. But what should I do with him? I asked. Bury him far beyond the well. My mother turned to tidy the bedding straw. It was as red as Christmas. We'd all had a hard night, but it had been hardest for the last of the pups, the one that was in my hands. I cradled him close against my chest, as if I had 2 hearts, but only one of them beating, then carried him away from the woodshed, into the pale spill of morning light, past the cabin, toward the well, and a grave waiting beyond it. But then I stopped, looked back, and there, on the cabin's broad granite step, a wooden pail brimming with cold water, waiting to be useful. I didn't know what was about to happen, but a little flicker in my chest flamed at the sight of the water full of green and blue from the tree. The sky overhead, calm, simple. It spoke to me with a voice louder than my mother's, and she stood at the door of the woodshed, bloody straw bundled in her arms, and said, "Go on then, Ellie." But I didn't go on then. The flicker, the flame, the voice all tugged me toward the bucket, where I plunged the baby dog deep into the cold, cold water and held him there until I felt him suddenly lurch and struggle. "Ellie, what are you doing?" my mother said, dropping the straw and rushing toward me. But she stopped and stared when I lifted the dripping, squirming pup and pulled him back against my chest. "He's not dead," I said, smiling. "Not dead at all," which made my mother smile too, for just a moment. "Then he's yours," she said, turning back for the straw. "See that you keep him that way." I didn't know if she meant that I should keep him alive or keep him mine, but I intended to do both. I sat on the step and dried the pup on my shirt tail, roughing up his slick pelt, which made him breathe harder, which made me breathe harder too, a series of sighs, as if we'd both been starved for air. Then I took him back to Maisie, who lifted her head and watched as I wedged him between the other pups and showed him the teat meant for him. When Maisie laid her head back down again, she sighed too. The pups all looked mostly the same, dark, perfect. One of them had a white forepaw. Another was bigger than the rest. Another, the same color in his coat. And my boy had some brindle too, and a white tipped tail, as if it were a brush he'd dipped in paint. So that set him apart. But I didn't need a marker. I was sure I would know him again in an instant, and I was sure that he would know me. "I'll have to think of a name for you," I told him as he began to gulp down his new life. And I did just that, all through my morning chores. While I pulled winter grass from the potato patch, I decided against Shadow, though he was dark and it suited him. I thought of Possum, because he hadn't really been dead, not really, as I bundled the grass and set it aside for the cows. I considered Boy, which he was, and Beauty, which he also was, as I weeded early spinach to come up from autumn seed. I thought about Tipper, for that white tip, as I bundled kindling. And finally, while I stowed the wood in the bin in the big kitchen stove, I chose Quiet. My little brother Samuel said, "I like that," as we ate a breakfast of dried blueberries, fire black potatoes, and milk still utter warm. "It's a heartbeat name." My mother said, "What?" "A heartbeat name. You know, 2 parts, ba-bum, ba-bum." And I liked that. Esther said, "Quiet's a dumb name." But she was my big sister, and she thought everything I did was dumb. "He'll wander off somewhere, and you'll go yelling, 'Quiet!' at the top of your lungs." She shook her head. Dumb. But I disagreed, though I did think that Quiet was an odd name, which was all right with me. I myself was odd in many ways, and I liked other things that were odd. Questions worth answering, like the ones that would soon lead me to Star Peak, to a boy who could make a knife sing, to a hag named Kate, and the other Elsas I came to know during that strange time. Some of them good, some of them bad. All of them tied to the flame that burned more brightly than ever on the day when Quiet was born. So that is the end of the first 4 of Echo Mountain. So there are some more First 4 Friday books for you, options for you to choose from if you can get to a library. But I suggest writing these down so that when you have time to choose more books, then you'll have some options listed and ready to go. Bye.